Welcome into the latest edition of the Zoneheads podcast. I'm Brandon. He's Zach, and we got you for the next 30 minutes or so as we break down the NFL playoffs piece by piece. It's now out. The wild card round is set. The Chiefs and the Lions have a first round bye. Zach, I've never been one to shy away from a wager, but I'll be honest, the NFL this season brutalized me. And it's hard every year, but it seemed like it was especially difficult for me. Week 18 is where I got a lot of it back. And talking to you pre-show, it seems like you did fairly well as well. So the vibes are high heading into the playoffs from a betting perspective. But are there any lessons learned from you this season in terms of from the betting or fantasy space, anything like that? And how did you do outside of
Yeah,
this week?
those are definitely separate questions because you and I obviously deep diving into fantasy football, bluntly, the tight end room is a mess. Wide receivers were tougher to kind of figure out this year. A lot of quarterbacks doing a lot of things. Like fantasy was very hard this year because I don't feel like there were just as many ballers that you could just count on from week 1 to week 18. So fantasy, we'll talk about that more later, but like I'm gonna shelve basically this season as a one-off. And I'm not going to try to change all my approaches and lessons from the last 10 years of playing, 20 years of playing, just because this season just seems so odd in a lot of ways compared to some of the others. Betting wise, though, Brandon, yes. And I think I already was starting to learn this, but this is something I've started to kind of lean more into, is I'm starting to bet less parlays or parlays that are smaller and going with things I just feel great about. And this is something you and I have even chatted about, and we were doing together, what was it, an 8 or 10 leg parlay combined with some of our picks?
Six.
Six, whatever. That's still a lot. So
It is.
what I'll do now is and this is a betting thing. I just didn't, I guess, know about it or learn about it till recently, like the ladders. So if I'm going to bet a 6 leg parlay, I'll still bet that, but at a lower price than I would have in the previous, betting life that I lived. I'll also bet a 3 leg or a 2 leg parlay about parts of it that I just am in love with more than the others, and I'll bet more money because I'm more confident in them. And then if there's ever a plus payout, like let's just say you're heavy on, I know they got their ass kicked, but the Browns to beat the Ravens in that last regular season game with Bailey Zappi in there. Like if you're like the Browns are winning this, I have the secret sauce. Well, the payout is so heavy just to bet that. Don't mix it into another parlay. If you feel confident, like overly confident, bet singularly on that and bet big. And if you can do that, you'll mitigate any losses and typically still stay in the green. Now, at the end of the day, two things: A, you're still gambling, and B, on the other side of that, like you have to be good at what you do. So even if you're confident, if you're not good at betting or you're not betting well, you're still going to lose. But if you feel good as a sports bettor and what you know and your knowledge and how to like play it out, less parlays, smaller parlays, and bet bigger on the plus payouts that you're in love with. Like those are kind of my golden rules that I
So
really
wait, did you
went with
just
this year.
did you just say that we should just accept the fact that we're gonna lose? Did I hear that correctly?
Uh, 8 leg parlays,
Oh
yes.
yeah, okay,
8 leg parlays,
but not
yes.
over the course of the season. I'm trying to be profitable. You know that I am. I'm not in this game anymore for, hey, let's throw $20 on a game so that I can sweat it out. And if it costs me $20, it costs me $20. I'm
Yeah.
trying to make money, even if it's just $5. I don't want to lose by the end of the year. I understand that some things may wash out, but
Yeah.
I'm no longer in this sports betting business for, hey, let's have a good time. I'm trying to make some money doing
Then
this.
don't bet every game. I mean, that's the easiest thing. It's
And
like
I think that right there is maybe my biggest lesson. Not that I was betting
yep.
every single game, but my cards were way too large. By the time I got to the end of the year, I realized I'm taking a bath because I just feel like I have to bet
You don't.
50% or more of the
You
games, and then
don't.
you add in props on top of it. You look back,
No.
you look at the card, and all of a sudden you're like, I've got too much on the line today. Pick the things that you feel the best about, live or die with
100%.
them. And there's a phrase that I've used in my own head that I will spit out to the listening audience, and that is a non-play on a game is a play on a game. Looking at a
Yeah.
game and deciding I have no idea, have no feel for how this one is going to go, or I can make a really good case for either side. not betting a game is in some sense betting a game. You are betting on the fact that I can't put $1 on this football game. And if you think about it in that way, then it is, in a sense, its own action. A non-action is an action.
Yeah, and two more things to kind of add to that based on the philosophy I was sharing prior. You can always bet like pennies on the dollar on those types of nights, right? Like do a $1 parlay with like 5 legs just to have some fun and have something to watch for if you really want to be involved, but don't let it like change your income and outcome in terms of the bigger monetary bank you've built up or are trying to build up. Also, if you don't bet on a game and you're watching it live and you're like, this team's
Uh-oh. I think I lost my man, Zach. He was waxing poetic on his betting philosophies and betting strategies. And one of the things that I also started doing in the NFL was leaning heavier into props. These lines are so sharp week to week in the NFL. And I've always been one to fade the public. And I'll get into that in a second. We'll see if Zach is able to hop back on the pod. But I've always been one that has sort of faded what the public sentiment is. And Zach is back. I was just droning on. But one of the things that I was mentioning was that player props, I feel like individually, and I'm not slamming all of these together because it's so hard to hit multiple picks on anything, but just the NFL, the stars tend to ball out, and just picking those spots can be quite profitable. If you were just to lean into just simply Jonathan Taylor the last 3 weeks of the season, you came out ahead. Guys like Mike Evans, when it comes to incentives or the tail end of the season and how motivated he was to hit certain benchmarks, paying attention to those kind of things can be quite profitable, especially if you leave them by themselves.
Yeah, and on that note, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, TDs the first half of the year, like we're
oh my god, yeah, and then they catch up,
for a year.
Right? They're going to catch up. They're going to heavily juice this stuff, but
yeah,
if you just figure out who's hot, ride them until you get priced out of the situation.
And if they're going to start to try to juice you out, like winning's still winning. So like if they, I mean, obviously you want to have some kind of profit, but that's an area where okay, and I think. Last thing on that real quick. I was going to say before I got booted out, live betting, if you're watching a game and you're in love with something, that's where you can always jump in too, even if you didn't pre-bet it and you're watching and you feel like something's going to pop or a team that's losing is going to come back because you see it there, you see them ready to break through. Another thing real quick, though, I know became really popular this year was anytime touchdown parlays. That was like the big thing. People would be like, all right, I'm taking these 5 to 10 players. They're getting in the end zone. Okay, take 2 or 3 of those guys that you're like, no, these guys 1,000% are going to score today. Parlay it with like a game or two where you're like, this team's definitely going to win or that team's definitely going to cover. Like that's where you got to get creative. I think people kind of get into these things where they have to do a same game parlay or they have to do only touchdowns. You can do a game, a touchdown, a player prop. Like you can mix and match. You don't even have to do the same sport. And I think it's just about, going with what you feel greatest about versus like tunnel visioning yourself into one game every night.
Yeah, I tend to find more luck with yards, and luck's probably not even the right word for it, but I just think that you don't deal with the variance of touchdowns can be a little bit fluky. You have to be in a certain position, things have to go your way on a particular play. Yards are cumulative, and good players tend to rack them up no matter the game script. So that's and because it's less sexy than the touchdowns, you tend to get better prices on yardage. So that was something that I learned as the season went along. But all things that we'll take with us not only into next season but into the playoffs. And I'm feeling good right now. So hopefully the wild card round doesn't screw us up too much.
No, and this is where it gets tricky because as we head into this, let's talk about the 2 teams that aren't playing next weekend and the Lions and Chiefs. And you and I in the Zone Head podcast a few weeks ago talked about those 2 teams and their paths. They were clearly the top dogs in the NFC and AFC. If you bet on the Lions and their player props this year, you probably made a lot of money.
Yep.
If you did that with Kansas City, you probably lost a lot of money. However, and you know how I feel about this, and you mentioned like last year's playoffs and Super Bowl, like I make so much money on the Chiefs in the postseason because everyone's asleep on them.
Yep.
And I'm gonna bet, even though Kansas City lost so much money for folks this year, between their against the spread, their player props, I'm still gonna bet heavy Chiefs in the playoffs because they're just a team like Brady was in New England for 20 years that you can trust most of the time in there. Similarly, I'll probably do the same thing with Detroit, but that doesn't help us in the first weekend, Brandon, because those two teams are shelved as the one seeds on each side.
I have placed 3 wagers on the playoffs so far. If you would like to know where we're at, one of them is for the Ravens to win the AFC. Another is for the Eagles to win the NFC. 25 on each. They both pay out 100 or slightly more.
Wow.
And then the Buffalo Bills -8.5 against the Denver Broncos in round 1. Those are the playoff wagers that have been placed. I feel like you're getting a good price on Baltimore. I'll reassess if Baltimore and Kansas City end up meeting in the AFC Championship. I don't think betting Kansas City right now to win the AFC I just don't think that's a smart bet. Betting them game to game is probably a better way to go about that. But I felt like the Ravens at 3-1, you're getting pretty good odds with Baltimore there.
Yeah, that is good odds. In preseason, I picked Baltimore to get over the hump and get to the Super Bowl this year. That being said, I'm going to bet the Chiefs every round. I'm going to bet them to get to the AFC. I'm going to bet them to win the Super Bowl. Like, they're just, to me, with Mahomes there, even if you want to bet other stuff, that's just like built in. And I said this because I was a much younger pup and I was figuring out life with the Brady first half of his decade, and then I rooted against him, so I bet against him. Well, the last few years of Brady, I was like, I got to make some money on this dude.
I know.
And I did just that. And with Mahomes, I promised myself that I wasn't going to fall for the same, thing. So I'm just naturally going to go that way. But I do want to talk about, we'll get into these wild card games now. The one you just mentioned, I love the Bills -8.5. But look, the Broncos, good for Sean Payton, Bo Nix, like ton of superlatives for a squad there that found their way back into the postseason. Like, we got to give Denver credit for getting to the dance, but they're the guy that walks in and then goes and stands in the corner while everybody else has a good time. Like, I don't see Denver competing with Buffalo. I wouldn't be shocked if the Bills won by 2 or 3 touchdowns, to be honest. But yeah, give me 8.5. Give me Josh Allen in his own house. Only winners get wings, and I think it's going to be Buffalo in that round. I love everything about their matchup in round 1, Brandon.
Yeah, give me those Buffalo Wild Wings in round 1. They have not lost a home game yet this season. And we see this kind of thing. This is more of like a trend opinion. We see this happen every year. You have this juggernaut that is hosting a playoff game against the team that's been this darling all year long. And man, it's hard to pick against them. And then they get into round 1, especially with a younger quarterback, and they just get smacked around. Buffalo is such a hard place to play, and the Bills are well rested because a lot of their guys didn't even make it through that game against the New England Patriots. So it was like a mini bye week. Josh Allen played a snap in that game just to keep his streak alive. And the one thing that the Broncos do there's 2 things they do exceedingly well. Bo Nix has had a solid season, but he's still been a little rough around the edges at times. He's a rookie quarterback. 3 and outs are a problem for them. But sacking the quarterback is one of their elite traits, and turning teams over. The Bills don't do either of those things. Josh Allen doesn't get sacked. This is the lowest sack rate he's had his whole career, and they don't turn the ball over. So I don't think they're going to play into Denver's hands, and we're probably looking at, I don't usually do score predictions, but I close my eyes and picture 40-20 in this one. 20-point win for Buffalo.
And like, I guess maybe there's another game I'm looking at where you can make this argument, but I think the biggest gap in quarterback play for any of these games is probably Bo Nix to Josh Allen. Obviously, Russell Wilson to Lamar Jackson. I understand why you would make that argument, but at least Russ has won and been in Super Bowls. He's got experience. Like, Bo Nix to Josh Allen, I think that's where the biggest gap exists. And to stay in the 7-2 matchups, and we'll kind of do it in that route, we'll go from the AFC to the NFC, Brandon, where you have the Eagles, who you just said you bet on, playing a Packers team with Jordan Love. I know he hurt his hand and left early in their finale, but Jordan Love, already short span of time last season, we saw he can step into the postseason and have some success. Philly, even though they're a 2 seed, they're healthy. They, similarly to Buffalo, rested a bunch of people. I'm not as confident in Philly over Green Bay as I am in a team like Buffalo over Denver. But Green Bay has been that team that's just kind of hung around at times, looked really good. I don't know if they have the star power to compete with an Eagles team right now, but it's tough for me to say I would be surprised if Jordan Love found a way and Matt LaFleur to kind of surprise Philly in round one.
Yeah, I just don't see it. The Eagles are just so stocked up right now. They're playing at such an elite level, and I wanted to buy into the Packers all year long. They were my sleeper pick at the start of the season to make it to the Super Bowl, and it felt like they just never fully rounded into form.
Agreed.
I think Jordan Love, like CJ Stroud, took a step back rather than a step forward. Growth is not linear. These things happen. It's fine. I think Jordan Love is still a really good quarterback. Josh Jacobs helped a ton. Their defense was banged up, but their defensive coordinator, whose name escapes me, is going to get a bunch of interviews because they did a really good job. They were a top 5 defense all year, even with the injuries that they had. Every week, it felt like Jair Alexander, who's one of the best defensive backs in the NFL, felt like he was on the shelf.
And I think he's out for the year. He's not going to be back for them. So
I think Love will be fine. So apparently the report yesterday was that he lost feeling in his hand because his funny bone got hit, which sounds like a pretty weak injury, but
is that a medical term? I thought we just said that as like kids. I didn't know people actually in the field of medicine were like, looks like the funny bone.
It's fun. Well, the bone is called the humerus, so you know. That's not a joke. That's what the bone is called.
I know, but it's not a joke, but you were saying it because it's funny.
I'm just saying, whoever called it the funny bone first, that person deserves to be in the nickname Hall of Fame. Hilarious.
I won't argue with that. Or
That's
did
great.
The funny bone come second? Was it named the humerus? And then somebody was like, it's funny bone because it's humorous. That's a separate podcast coming to you at a later date.
That sounds like that's got July written all over it.
But next to our Mount Rushmores. We'll do our Mount Rushmores the same week.
Fantastic. Yeah, that one. So round one, that one's gonna wrap up our Sunday. Not a bad spot. They're up to 5.5-point favorites. Damn, I should have taken that at 3.5.
The Eagles, yeah.
They opened as 3.5-point favorites. It's moved 2 whole points already.
And I think you're going to see, obviously, these lines are going to move all week. Buffalo, I think, will end up at like 10.5 by the end of it. I know we just talked about taking them at 8.5. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to go up.
If anyone still has this Eagles minus 3.5, I'm betting this on the podcast.
And again, I am not going to bet against the Eagles to not only win, but to cover. I'm just saying, and I feel like you were on it with everything you mentioned about Green Bay, but if there's ever a time to figure it out, why not the postseason? And again, Jordan Love's a guy who has shown he can step into the playoffs again, just at least last year, and be a top tier quarterback. And they beat some good teams last year. We felt really good about, I think, Dallas last year when they beat them, right? Great season, all these weapons. And Green Bay, I think, went into Dallas and beat them, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but that's Dallas, you know?
Okay.
That kind of thing happens to Dallas. This isn't happening in Philly.
Philly was a mess in the locker room last year under Sirianni. People wanted him fired. And this year alone, A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts have already gotten into it within the
I know. I'm just saying playoff disappointment is like par for the course in Dallas.
Fair.
I think if you were to go back to last year, you would have been much more optimistic on the Packers in that position against Dallas than you are right now against Philadelphia. But Jordan Love did ball out in that game, and if it happens again, obviously anything is possible. It's not like the Packers don't have talent. If the Packers play well and win this game, and Jordan Love is awesome, this now becomes the brand of Jordan Love, where you go, it doesn't matter what he does in the regular season. This is a playoff quarterback.
Which is hilarious because it's the exact opposite of Aaron Rodgers the last 15 years in Green Bay. He's like the regular season guy that gets to the playoffs and then really, really struggles. The Jets trying to figure out life up in New York, but that's a separate podcast as well.
I got Philly at minus 4.5 on Better Edge, so there you go. We're getting some line value here.
It's take it all.
I got
it. You want to stay in the NFC and move to the 3 and the 6?
Let's do it.
All right, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They welcome the Washington Commanders to town, and we've been talking about the Bucs a ton lately. First off, shout out to a guy like Mike Evans, who has his 11th straight 1,000-yard receiving season. Only other player to ever do that, Jerry freaking Rice. So
awesome.
Mike Evans, not only a Hall of Famer, but in my opinion, and many's, I think at this point, as a Super Bowl champ too, one with the Brady team, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the best we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. Like he's a monster. He's a monster. But Mike Evans, shout out to you in that record, and a great guy off the field too. I can tell he's done nothing but awesome things here in Tampa Bay and in Galveston, where he's from over in Texas. He's just awesome. Him and his family, like we're just so lucky to have him not only in Tampa Bay and with the Bucks, but in this league and on this earth. But the Bucks get a win, and they are now a 10-win team. They've and we talked about Todd Bowles the last 3 years. They won 8 games in Bowles in his first season with Brady, won the division. They lost in the first round. Last year, they won 9 games, won the division, won in the first round. This year, they've won 10 games. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but they're on a trajectory that improves a little bit every year. And that doesn't take into consideration all the things they've had to overcome, like Chris Godwin's injury, the salary issues in the past, resurrecting a guy like Baker Mayfield, 3 different offensive coordinators in that span as well. It has been a lot of moving parts, and Todd Bowles has been the constant. So I just want to give him some credit and some love. He's not perfect. At this point, he's not a Hall of Fame coach. I'd be surprised if he turned into one, but he's not a bad coach, and he's certainly not one of the bottom half types of coaches in this league. He's in the upper half right now.
Yeah, he's done a phenomenal job. I don't know how anybody could say anything differently. This was a team that many pundits predicted to go 6-11 this year. And that was a regular opinion that Atlanta was going to win the NFC South. Hand up, by the way. I thought the Bucks were good value in the betting market, but I was on the Falcons to win the division, like most people out there, bought into the paper champions that are the Atlanta Falcons. Then at the start of the year, remember the first 2 weeks into the season, it wasn't the Minnesota Vikings that were all the rage with their new flashy offense. It was the New Orleans Saints. And people were all bought in, and they suckered me into that one too. And all the while, you sleep on the consistency and steady growth. It's something that I think because in other sports, it's not rewarded as much as it is in the NFL. Steady growth, consistency, continuity, this stuff matters in the NFL, and the Bucks have enough talent to say it's not just the consistency that gets them by. Baker Mayfield, it took years for this to come to fruition, but he looks like a guy that was a number 1 overall pick. And Mike Evans, I mean, my God, this guy has not dropped off one iota throughout the course of his career. He has just been this good the entire time. And talk about charitable efforts. He got Johnny Manziel drafted in the first round, so that might have been the most charitable thing that man ever did.
Yeah, I won't argue there. And look, I'm one of the people that believed in the Bucks because I bought the Saints hype a year ago when Derek Carr came to town, and I learned my lesson pretty quickly. So I did cash a ticket for the Bucks to win the NFC South, along with some other profitable things this Sunday.
That was like weekend. Plus 325, if I remember correctly.
It was very profitable.
That was awesome.
I actually cashed it out at one point too and put more in. I think it was after they lost to Atlanta the first time because the odds got better. I don't remember. I did cash it out and like pour it back in at one point because it went up even more. But it is what it is. Like the bottom line is Atlanta's out, Bucks are in, and they're welcoming Washington to town, which is a team that's different. I said when the season started that the Bucks were lucky to see Jaden Daniels week 1 because he was going to be a star by the end of the year. I did not think they'd have to see him again in week 19 in the postseason. And look, this team, they're not perfect, but first-year head coach with them and Dan Quinn. They've got some weapons. Bobby Wagner, veteran on that defense, has some things rolling. Washington's a scary team. I mean, I still do like the Bucks at home, but I don't think I would touch them beyond anything other than money line against the Commanders next weekend.
It's a great draw for the Bucks. I really worried that they were going to have to face one of these teams from the NFC North. I would have liked all of them, even the mess that is the Green Bay Packers, over the Bucks. I just think stylistically it would be good for Jordan Love to be able to kind of pick apart that Buccaneers secondary, but Todd Bowles against he's still a rookie quarterback. This is still Jaden Daniels making his first playoff start. I don't think you could ask for anything better right now. It felt like the Commanders kind of peaked midway through the season, and they've just been getting by ever since. The NFC East, at the end of the year, when you start really stacking those divisional games, I mean, who are they really playing? You know, the Giants and the Cowboys. It's hard to make out what they exactly are right now, but I buy into what I'm seeing with Tampa Bay, at least to get by in this one. The spread went from 3.5 down to 3, so it looks like there's Commanders money that's coming in. Makes sense. This should be a close game. Why not get the 3 plus the hook? But
Yeah.
I would take the Buccaneers. I'm not going to bet it right now. Maybe by the time we get there, but I would be on the Bucs. I think they're the better team here. Better team at home. A smart, savvy, defensive-minded head coach who has feasted on quarterbacks like this over the course of their careers. I like Tampa to win this game, and I think they have a good chance of covering the spread as well.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I just feel really good about them in the first round. They're at home. Baker showed last year he's not afraid of the moment. Mike, he's been there. Bucky, and then all the young pieces are
Oh,
starting to show
Bucky.
up.
I mean, how do we not mention Bucky?
Bucky Irving. I mean,
It's amazing the way he makes this offense go. I think he's what, and when you talk about that consistency and getting better, slow and steady growth, he's such a huge part of that. Rashad White is a nice player.
Yep.
Bucky Irving is a superstar.
His vision is insane, Brandon. I mean,
It's the
obviously
best.
there's other things he does out there, but sometimes when he stops and he cuts and it's like behind the line and you're like, oh, he's not going to get any yardage, and then he skirts through for 5, 6, 7, 8 yards or breaks a big one. It reminds me a lot, and I'm not comping him to this guy, but just in my mind of Le'Veon Bell his first season, where you'd see him stopping in the hole or in the backfield, and you're like, this dude's going to get smushed. And then he takes off in a direction, ping pongs around, and all of a sudden he's through the second level of the defense. And you're like, what the hell? So
I'm so glad that you brought up the vision, because I feel like it's so obvious when you watch him, and it's a trait that running backs don't get enough credit for.
Man.
To me, he's a less talk about not comping. I see a Barry Sanders in him stylistically, just in terms of vision.
I thought I needed the disclaimer.
Yeah, right. Just the greatest running back of all time. But just he sees things happening at the second level from behind the line of scrimmage. It's next level stuff. I think he has some of the best vision from what I see, what my amateur eye tells me. He has some of the best vision in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not just him in terms of rookies. Jalen McMillan has burst onto the scene as a rookie out of Washington. A lot of people in Tampa Bay were high on him this year. He didn't make an impact early on, though. But with Godwin going down and you get through the bye week, get through some injuries, McMillan and Baker seem to be moving and grooving to the point where you're not really too worried about a drop off. You would like to have Godwin healthy, obviously, but like in terms of this offense, they're still good to go. They got a lot of weapons. Offensive line is cohesive, basically the same O-line they started the year with, so that helps a ton. And we talk about who's healthy at the end of the season. That usually is a big part of it. Defense has to get healthy. No Antoine Winfield Jr. Jordan Whitehead was involved in a car accident. He's going to be okay, but it doesn't look like he's going to play at all again this year for the Bucs. The safety room is thin. The cornerback room is thin. So in that secondary, the Bucs have to get healthy, but I don't think that that's going to be what costs them against the Commanders. I think they get through Washington, and that'll be a divisional round conversation, I think.
So far, it seems like we're in agreement with most of this stuff. I wonder where the disagreement comes. There's no way we see eye to eye on all of these playoff games, and there's no way that we like all of the favorites either.
Well, let's move to the other 3-6 matchup, which is the Steelers heading to Baltimore.
Well, this isn't going to change anything.
Isn't it, though? I mean, hear me out, right? Like,
all right,
divisional
matchup.
Listening. This is the third time these teams have played each other this year. They split, right? We know what the Steelers defense can bring. We know Lamar doesn't have the best track record in the postseason. I don't think that this is a home run Baltimore over Pittsburgh win. And I know the Steelers are on their worst skid in like, I think 20 years in terms of their offensive output being 17 points or less the last like 5, 6, 7, 8 games. Like it's a crazy stretch. It's been ugly. I'm just not so quick to count the Steelers out in this one because it's a divisional matchup. I'd have a hard time betting Steelers money line. I don't know what you have the spread at right now.
9.5.
I might lean into the Steelers at 9.5, to be honest. Now, again, I'm not going to bet the Steelers money line. That feels a little nuts. But I kind of like Pittsburgh with the 9.5 points in a game where you're expecting them to, throw everything in the kitchen sink at a Baltimore squad that has lost to them this year and has shown that in times past, the postseason can be their bugaboo.
It is hard betting against Mike Tomlin. He'll always have his teams ready to go. But I just think it becomes a talent issue. I think Russell Wilson has hit a major wall. They've lost 4 games in a row. In 3 of those games, he has thrown for less than 210. In 2 of those games, he's thrown for less than 150. George Pickens is increasingly a headache. and they just got smacked by the Ravens the last time they played them. I think this Baltimore team, with the way that they've come around defensively over the last 4 weeks, they're the number one defense in the NFL, and they were a mess for the first half of the season. It's a huge turnaround. It's why I bet them to come out of the AFC. The Henry aspect this is why you brought him in, not to put up 1,600 yards in the regular season. This is why he's here. Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP level. I worry a little bit about the Zay Flowers injury, but they're so good with those two, Lamar and Henry. I think they can make up for a lot for whoever would be missing. And then defensively, the way that they've stepped up. So they're trending in the right direction. The Steelers are trending in the wrong direction. I just don't know how Pittsburgh keeps up in this game. It is a lot of points. I have too much respect for Mike Tomlin to bet it, but I can guarantee you I will not be betting on the Pittsburgh Steelers here.
That's
this is when I said a non-play is a play, I will not be playing this game. But if we were in some kind of pick 'em pool, I would take the Baltimore Ravens.
So I will bet the Steelers at 9.5. I love these divisional games. This has been honestly and arguably one of the best rivalries in the NFL for like 20 years, right? I know it's not quite Roethlisberger, Flacco, and things have changed.
Oh yeah,
right.
All the trends are going to say bet the Steelers, all of them. Anytime AFC North teams play and you have the underdog, especially if it's an underdog of more than 3 points, the numbers are like 70% against the spread. This number is as big as it is for a reason. The Steelers have turned into a big, giant pumpkin.
All right, we got 2 more games to call here. Let's stay in the AFC, because I think the last matchup, I think Minnesota, the Rams are like one of the most interesting matchups out there. I think Houston welcoming the Chargers to town is the one that I want to go to next here. So we'll stay on the AFC side, and obviously that's the 5 act of 4. How about Jim Harbaugh getting the Chargers?
Yeah.
Justin Herbert. I mean, this is a team that plays really staunch defense. We figured they would with Harbaugh. They figured out the running game with resurgence efforts from a guy like J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and a few other backs. Justin Herbert, we know how talented he is. And Quentin Johnston, who a lot of people wrote off after his rookie years, looked good this year. Obviously, Ladd McConkey has been a fun rookie, to put it lightly. So, man, on the flip side, you mentioned C.J. Stroud taking a step back. It's just the Texans are mind-boggling to me, because I thought that if there's no way they're worse than they were last year. But if you've watched a lot of Texans games this year, they don't look nearly as good as they did last season. And now they are dealing with injuries, obviously. Stephon Diggs they brought in, he's done, been done. Tank Dell's a big weapon who was disappointing all year, but he's done. So it is different. Mixon was a nice add. He's been good for them at running back, but man, and Houston, for the most part, stays in close games. So I got to give him credit there, regardless of thinking they've taken somewhat of a step back. I just have a hard time buying the Houston Texans. And similarly, I don't know if it's because of Harbaugh or Herbert, but like the Chargers are just so much sexier right now from a betting perspective.
They are. This will be the first underdog that I like, though. I like Houston. It's it is not as appealing as some of these other teams that could be out there. I just think the Chargers have kind of hit a wall. I don't really buy into this offense. I think that they've gotten by with their defense creating a lot of turnovers, their defense creating a lot of points. The Chargers are the worst second half team in the NFL. Can you get by like that in the playoffs on the road against a Houston team that, yes, they're without a lot of talent on offense? Nico Collins is still the guy that makes it all go. You still have Joe Mixon, who's been a huge help to them. He didn't have to play for much of the last game, so he'll be well rested. And then the defense has so much talent on it. I feel like their defense has been underperforming all year, and if at any point they put it all together, they're going to have one of these surprise games, and what better time than now to pull that rabbit out of the hat. You know, I love Will Anderson. Derek Stingley is one of the best young cornerbacks in the NFL. They added Danielle Hunter in the offseason to boast that pass rush. They've got the pieces. And D'Amico Ryans is a really good head coach. I'm just going to bet on them to piece it together enough to get by the Chargers, and then they'll probably get blown out by the next team they play.
Yeah, and look, I have no issue taking Houston home effort here. So you're talking about taking the money line, I'm assuming, right? In that
Well, I would
scenario.
take the points, and
Yeah.
that's always been a betting philosophy of mine. Why even bother, especially in the NFL where the margins are so tight? We're talking about 2.5 or 3 points. You're not making that much more money by betting money line. I would pick the Texans, yes, but in terms of the bet, I'll take the extra points just in case a last second field goal does me in.
Yeah, and I think this will be a field goal game. So take that for whatever it's worth, whoever you like. Use the points in your favor. I would probably bet Chargers money line in this one. Um, I do. I just like the way they're rolling right now under Harbaugh, and I don't know, man. It's more of the stench on Houston from this season. I'm having a hard time getting away from, and I get the Nico part because
Yeah.
that's true. Even if those other two guys were healthy, I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, last year was such a good learning experience for them, and they're able to parlay that against the squad with a first-year head coach that
Also,
hasn't been awesome.
a fun stat for you.
I
This is the
love fun
eighth
stats.
time since 2011 the Texans have hosted a game on Wild Card Weekend. They are 5-2 in those games, and this
Yeah,
is one
but
of the better Texans teams that they've had during that stretch too. Because they've had
is
some.
CJ Stroud right now with his Texans team better than Deshaun Watson was at his peak when they were winning all those games you just referenced in Houston? Because I would say no. I would say CJ looked really good as a rookie last year. We were ready to crown him. And I'd say this season, although I don't think he's been bad,
He
he
hasn't.
hasn't been above average often.
He didn't get better. He got worse. I,
Yeah,
I
but I don't
think
think he's
that.
been bad. I just don't think you're talking about a Texans team that had all that success. Deshaun Watson was flying that team to the moon before he had to
But
go.
this is a. I don't think this. I think this might account for a Matt Schaub team in there. I guess is what I was trying to say. No,
Matt.
I agree. The Deshaun Watson Texans. We have to remember he used to be a good quarterback. Those Texans teams were better than where the Texans are at the moment on offense. I do think this Texans defense is going to be what carries them to a win this weekend.
Yeah, I was done with this chat at Matt Shaw. All right, so we'll move on to the
I'll
last
have to look
matchup.
that one up. When did Matt Schaub leave? Am I really Googling Matt Schaub here on a Monday? What is
You did
going
it to
on?
yourself. He's in your head. Him and Davis Mills, the unforgottens. Although Davis had a lot going on in their finale.
He
As you
wrapped it
put
up
this
in
to.
2013 with the Texans, so I'm not sure that this applies.
I was gonna give it to you. Speaking of wrapping things up, here we are at the last game. The Rams. We talked about the Bucks hosting Washington and how that path worked out for them. Well, the Rams rested everybody and said, "We just want to be healthy." They lost the 3 seed, so the Rams and Bucks essentially swapped spots because LA punted the last game of the season while Tampa Bay went out. I mean, they had to win, in theory, thinking that the Falcons would beat the Panthers. That didn't happen either. But regardless, the Bucks because they won and the Rams because they lost in the final week of the regular season swap spots. So instead of the Bucks hosting the Minnesota Vikings who lost to the Lions last night, the Bucks, as we talked about, get Washington and Tampa Bay. Well, the Rams welcome Sam Darnold and those Vikings to town. I know they just got stomped by the Lions, but Minnesota's been phenomenal this year. Sam Darnold, similar to a guy like Baker Mayfield a season ago, has really found his groove. And I know you had the picture of Darnold and Baker in Carolina, but I
Yeah.
think Panthers fans are happy with Bryce Young at the exact moment in time that we're in. I don't know what to do off the bat with the Rams Vikings. This is the one that I think for me, Brandon, I'll probably sit on until maybe like the day of, maybe an hour before. Like,
It is the last game of the weekend. This one's on a
yeah,
Monday, so I would advise anybody out there. Let's see how the weekend goes before we tie up any of our money on Vikings Rams. I think this is the hardest game to pick on the entire slate.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
I
I
would.
don't know where you have the line at right now.
It
Rams
is
obviously at
Vikings minus
home.
1.5.
I mean, I would probably take the Vikings at -1.5, but like the Rams, look, those rookies on defense they drafted versus Fisk. I mean, they've replaced somehow Aaron Donald in a way that you're not completely like we're screwed on that side of the ball. There's obviously other players that are helping out from that standpoint, but you have McVay's brain, and nothing against Kevin O'Connell because he's been brilliant too as an offensive minded guy in the league. Nakua, Cobb, Stafford slinging. I mean, remember, Stafford and this Rams team took the Lions to the brink last year in Detroit in a game that was insanely emotional for Lions fans up in Motown. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you just have to ask yourself one question. Am I willing to bet on Sam Darnold as a road playoff quarterback to win this game?
Not just a road quarterback, but a road favorite. And I don't think I'm there.
It's tough, man.
I
Is
don't
that
think I
messed
can
up
do
though?
it.
Is that crappy of us? Like, and not you and I, but like us, this football community, everybody outside of Minnesota. I mean, listen, people did it to Baker last year, so I lived it. I already saw it from the other side. But is that kind of crappy that we're not giving Darnold more credit after his year?
Yeah, a little bit. a little crappy, but it is what it is. You know, he's been a marginal quarterback throughout the course of his career, and we are a species that demands proof before we can buy into something wholeheartedly. And Sam Darnold doing that over the course of the season was like, okay, maybe I'll start to buy in. Then you're in a must-win situation against the Detroit Lions, who have the most injury-ravaged defense in the NFL, and you put up 9 points. And Sam Darnold was awful last night. So if you were a skeptic, but you weren't negative, you can be skeptical and not negative. And I think I would put myself in that bucket where I go, okay, I'm not discounting Sam Darnold, but I'm also not going to stand outside the house waving the Sam Darnold flag. Let's wait and see. And then I took the Lions last night because I had a feeling this might happen, and that was part of the profitable weekend. Sam Darnold laid an egg, and now he goes into L.A. to take on, and you've got Kevin O'Connell. It is teacher versus apprentice. I'll take teacher. I think Matt Stafford's a better quarterback than Sam Darnold, so I get better coach, better quarterback. I get the home team. I get them plus at least a couple of points. And the last time these two teams played, it was the LA Rams that won back in week 8, a 10-point win for the LA Rams. They've already shown that they could do it in the heat of everything that was going on this season for the Minnesota Vikings. I think we look back on Minnesota's run this year. We golf clap them. We give Sam Darnold a contract, and then you look and see that he played a bunch of soft opponents that they took advantage of, and they really weren't all that good.
Swapped out Kirk Cousins for Sam Darnold, and we're in the same place with Minnesota we've been the last 5 years. Crazy.
They had a better regular season. At least they had that.
I won't bet on it yet. I'm going to wait until the finale there. I got to talk myself into taking the Vikings money line. I feel like I don't know. I'm not there yet, but that's going to be a tough game to bet for sure. And look, again, how much does the last game of the season against the Lions affect your bet versus the rest of the year? And for you, it seems pretty clear that like it's pushing you in the direction, of the Rams, plus the Rams beating the Vikings earlier in the year.
Yeah. If you were already skeptical on the Vikings, and then that's what they did in a playoff setting, there's no reason for you to then reverse course and go, but now I feel great about them. It wouldn't make any sense. This isn't even so much a bet on the Rams. It's just I think I'm kind of done with the Vikings, I guess. Over the Vikings.
I couldn't tell.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Zoneheads podcast. Please subscribe to this channel, and you can also check out our new website, zoneheadsmedia.com, see if we can help with your media needs. Also, a reminder that Zoneheads 35, the beer, still available in both Hourglass locations. Zach, I still need to pick you up a 4-pack, but we'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, he's nodding along. I'm Brandon Kravitz. He's Zach Blobner. We'll chat soon, Zoneheads.